What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Tonight we are in the shop and we're going to be working on this Comanche here. So every once in a while I will bring in a customer's vehicle and basically record how I repair the Jeep if I think it is YouTube worthy. So I think this one's kind of YouTube worthy, so check this out. So the untrained eye may be like, well, it just looks like there's something hanging down. But I want you to notice something. Look how far the tire sticks out over here versus how far the tire sticks out right here. So if you know anything about these Jeeps, you know that basically the whole front suspension and the whole front axle is controlled by what they call the track bar. As you can see, the track bar is not controlling anything at the moment because it has actually sheared off of the axle here. So this Jeep actually broke at our off-road event that we put on here in Eastern North Carolina, the Off-Road Affair and Overlanding event. This Jeep's pretty cool, but it definitely needs a lot of work before it can drive or go on any trails. I have a soft spot for Comanches. And it looks like it's got some kind of bed liner on it. I'm not crazy about that. So I'm gonna try to get you in here to show you kind of the carnage we got going on. So you can see right here, first off, look at the coil spring. You can see how far off center the body is from the axle. So what that track bar right there does, it was actually right there, and now it's right there. But what that basically does is it centers the body of the Jeep over the body of the axle. So I would say the track bar is probably one of the most important features on one of these Jeeps right here, because if it wears out or if it breaks or anything like that, then you're gonna have a bad day. And it looks like somebody's already been in here and done some welding. That's not good. And you can see there, that third member, you can see here, that is broken. That is not connected. There's a lot of booger welds on here. So that coil right there where the light is actually leaned back towards the rear of the vehicle. I don't believe that has been welded on correctly. And the passenger side is the same way too. I believe before that broke, I believe it had some issues before, because if you look right there, that link is fine, but the axle, the coil mounts are just still tilted back. This is honestly one of those situations where the more you look at it, the worse it kind of gets. So what I think I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and raise the Jeep on up, and we're gonna drop this front axle on the ground. Not drop it, but we're gonna leave it on the ground. And then we're probably just going to assess the damages there. Feel the cold ground underneath my boots. Got the Jeep up in the air, and now I'm going to be taking out the drive shaft. I've already took out the 4 nuts on it. So now I've just got to pry it out, just like that. This thing is really muddy. It's kind of gross. Oh man. So I got the drive shaft disconnected, and this thing has a lot going on. So it's got a lot good going on, but it also has a lot not so good going on. And what's really aggravating is every time I do anything, it just completely covers my shop floor. So I'm probably just gonna end up looking like a Oompa Loompa after all this is done, because that red clay is just all in here. So Now what I'm gonna do is I'm just going to loosen up everything. I'm probably going to take the brake calipers off of the brake rotors, get those out of the way, and then I'm going to try to get try to chip away at some of this mud that's impacted on here, sweep it up, and then I can drop the axle on the ground on jack stands. So yeah, let's get to it. Like I said, I'm gonna start by taking these calipers off, and I'm gonna be using a 12mm gear wrench. There we go. Come on. Oh yeah. So now I'm gonna put these calipers safely out of the way. That way they won't fall down and hit me in the face. Now I'm going to, so now that I got the calipers out of the way, I can kind of go in here and start just getting up some of this dirt that's just all over this axle. I mean, it is everywhere. So whenever I mess with stuff, I really can't stand working on something that is dirty, especially when I know I'm gonna be welding to it. So I just want to basically just get up all this compacted mud that is just everywhere. So I've kind of got everything tidied up just a little bit. I did go around and kind of just agitate some of that impacted mud on the Jeep. That way I can go and just sweep it up, because it's gonna be easier. It's gonna be easier to sweep up now than it will be when the jack stands are down there. So now what I'm gonna do is lower the Jeep down, and I'm going to go ahead and start working on getting this front axle out. I feel like every time I turn a bolt on this Jeep, I figure out something else not usual. So this shock section right here, this is not factory. It's 2 open tabs on the back of this coal bucket. So I'm gonna get the shock off right here. All right. So as you can tell, that bolt has been in there for a few minutes. So I'm not very impressed with this shock tab right there. So now I'm going to try to get this lower control arm bolt out. And this is a 21mm, and this is not a factory bracket either. So I don't think there is any factory brackets on this Dana 30. So if you're looking for a used Jeep, this is stuff that you need to be looking for. You know, if you don't really know what you're looking at, you know, the person selling you this Jeep could tell you, oh, it's got aftermarket brackets on here. And you're like, oh, that's cool. And then you realize that they weren't installed correctly at all. And then you're gonna end up at a shop like mine. All right, so you can see that control arm bolt, it's been in there a few minutes also. Oh God, oh, it stinks.
This smells like somebody spilled Chinese food in a bird cage.
Honestly, it's not mine.
right, so it is the next morning. It is currently 6:30. Still dark outside. Couldn't really sleep, so I figured I would wake myself up with some coffee and some metal sparks. So what I plan on doing right now is obviously I have to cut all this bracket off, and you can see it may be a pain in the butt because it is like half an inch thick with Gorilla Weld and bubble gum. And while I'm at it, I'm gonna go ahead and cut these brackets off because they are installed incorrectly. They are not lined up at all. And yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and cut these off because they're not even welded right there. And what I really want to stress about this is the owner of this Jeep had no idea that this axle was in this condition. But he bought this Jeep out of state and brought it home, never put it on the road, just kind of used it as a trail rig. And thank goodness for that, because that track bar coming off could have killed somebody. So whenever you are looking at used vehicles and Jeeps and stuff like that, this is stuff that you need to look for. You need to look for this type of welds, because I can promise you if they do this type of weld, or if they think that is acceptable, then there's going to be a lot of other stuff on the rig that is not acceptable. So just something to think about. Make sure that when you're buying something used that you look at brackets and stuff like that. So what I'm trying to say is just kind of let this be the lesson. Don't put yourself in a bad situation, because if he would have drove this Jeep on the road, then that track bar could have come off, and you can see where it's been spottily, it's been barely welded on for a long time because there's no raw metal exposed. So that's kind of terrifying if you think about it. So what I plan on doing now is I'm gonna get my plasma cutter out, and I'm just gonna start just kind of holding it sideways and just kind of going around right here. I just want to minimize the time that I have to hold an angle grinder on here, just because everyone knows that's just kind of exhausting. And I'm gonna go ahead and cut these off and go ahead and cut all that off. So the lower control arm mounts, they don't look bad. What I may do is just go back and re-weld those. I need to measure them to make sure that they are installed correctly and make sure that they are on the same plane and everything like that. But like, look at this. Like, look at these shock tabs. You see that? That is not acceptable. That one's cracked. Look at the crack right there. This is insane. Someone ought to be ashamed of themselves. I honestly hope that whoever did these welds sees the thumbnail of this video and be like, ooh, yeah, I did the welds on that. And yes, I am weld shaming someone. So check this out. Got the axle all cleaned up. Let me turn my light back on. It was a lot of work and I almost dropped it one time, but it is definitely worth it. And so I've just got to go back and just kind of clean up and sand just a little bit, because it is kind of a wavy mess right now. Not the actual tube, but just the surface of the tube. It was just booger welded. It was really, really difficult for my plasma cutter to cut through because it was so sporous, and then I kept burning through plasma cutter tips. It was just a mess. But I did inspect these lower control arm brackets, and they are good. I'm just going to probably just re-weld them. But man, this looks really good. It already looks better. I need to go ahead and take the internals out, and what I mean by that is I need to take these two bearing caps off. I need to take the carrier out, but before I can do that, I have to take the driver's side axle shaft out and the passenger side axle shaft. And how you do that, if you're not familiar, is you have 3 of these bolts right here. They are a 13 millimeter star bolt, and once you take those off, these are those bolts right there. But once you take those off, you can actually take this unit bearing on, and you're gonna have to be hammering on these just a little bit just to unseize them from the knuckle here. And that is why I put it on this table. I got it off the jack stands just because I wanted just to make sure that this axle doesn't drop. The last thing that y'all saw me do was I basically got this axle down to the housing right there. I did some measuring, and I'm gonna be leaving the lower control arm mounts just because they're actually welded on, but I'm still gonna go back over and maybe do a second pass with the welds. But check this out, look at the parts that came in. Basically everything right here is what I'm gonna be using on that Dana 30. I'm gonna be putting on the Arctic shock mounts, which also is the coil spring retainers, because basically that just kind of plops right there. And they got the sway bar links, and then I have the new track bar mount. So this actually does come with a track bar mount, but I'm not going to be using it because I'm going with the over the axle track bar. I do have the Barnes truss for the Dana 30. I got this used because these are out of stock, so I had to kind of do some figuring there, because this is probably one of my favorite trusses on the Dana 30s. And then it comes with the upper control arm mount, and it goes right there. And then we're going to be throwing an Aussie in at the same time. So we got a lot of metal, we got a lot of parts here, but this Jeep needs it, it deserves it. It's a Comanche. So what I'm going to do now is probably going to start just slowly figuring out exactly where everything needs to live. Of course, I'm not going to fully weld anything. I'm just going to tack weld stuff for right now. But basically, I want to get this cover back on because I don't want any sparks or anything, or I don't want any slag to get on the pinion or get in any of these carrying bearing races or anything like that. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and get the cover on, and then we'll start putting the puzzle together here. And check that thing out. So I did some horse trading this week and ended up with a 2018 Polaris RZR XP Turbo. The thing's nuts. So let me know in the comments if y'all want to see any footage or anything or any content on the side-by-side stuff. I definitely have some ideas for that for the channel. I'm not going to say anything right now, but let me know if y'all would be interested in seeing any footage or content or anything like that on the Turbo RZR. But anyway, let's get back to work. I just put the Dana 30 on some jack stands, and I did go ahead and get the caster angles exactly where I want them. I got them at 7 degrees, which is, so 7 degrees is where I set up all of my axles, somewhere in there. So whenever I start with a bare axle housing, I just go ahead and get the caster correct, and then everything else will just kind of fall in line as long as you just kind of pay attention to your caster angles. So one of the first things that I want to do is I want to go ahead and get this truss tacked on, just because it's one of the biggest pieces and it has a certain degree that it needs to go. So it needs to go at, if the axle is at 0 degrees, this needs to go at 9 degrees. And then that's gonna sit right there. So the first thing that I'm gonna do is I'm going to go ahead and put in these tabs right here. These are the Barnes support brackets, and they just slide in just like that. But you have to weld these up. So I've got this all welded up, and as you can see, made some good penetration on here. I couldn't really get good penetration all the way down here, but that's okay, because I'm gonna come back and fully weld everything right here. What I'm doing now is I am getting this surface of the differential cover to 0. And I have it at 0.2, which is close enough for me. So I did paint the inside with some Steelite. That way I know that it won't rust or anything like that. I have this at 0 degrees, this mating surface right here. And then this is going to go on, and it is going to be 9 degrees back from this surface right here. So this truss is going to be pushed back around 9 degrees. So now I'm going to, and if you don't have one of these digital angle finders, they are awesome. So that is 6 degrees, 7 degrees, 8 degrees, 9 degrees right there. All right, so now I know where I need to clean up everything really good. So I've got to get all of this old nasty rust off of this differential housing. I pretty much got all this cleaned up. I've just got to sand back over it and kind of smooth it down, make it look nicer. And then we can start putting some tacks on here. Once I grinded all the nasty rust and oil and stuff like that, I hit it with some brake cleaner just to get any contaminants out of the spores in here. This cast right here is a little bit more sporous, I would say, and it can kind of get divots in there and kind of get contaminants and rust and oil, stuff like that, and that'll kind of mess up the welds. It will mess up the welds. Before I do any preheating, I'm just going to tack this on. That way I know exactly where it's going to be. So the reason I'm tacking this on is because this is the main structure that I'm working off of. So the other brackets I can modify to work with this. I really don't want to modify this. So that's kind of why I am putting this one on solid, and then the rest of the brackets I'll modify if I have to. Now that I have the truss tack welded on, I can put the axle back at the position that is going to be underneath the Jeep, which is around 6.5, 7 degrees of caster. And so I basically want to be welding these brackets on as if it's underneath the Jeep, but obviously I can't do that, so I'm just gonna simulate it right here on this table. It's just kind of a quick way to do it is you can zero it out on the ground, just zero it out on the ground, and then you can come right here at the top of this ball joint, and it'll basically tell you a quick reading of it. Right there, 6.5. 6.5 is a good number because I can go basically either way. So basically everything else from here on out needs to be basically 0. So these mounts right here, they will be 0, and this mount right here will be 0, and then oh crap, I forgot. So basically what I'm gonna do now, because I forgot to tack this on, I'm just going to put it at the same degree as this. So I'm just gonna leave the axle where it is and plop this on here just like that. Put my degree finder on here. 87.3. And I'm just going to get it at, oh, that's it. So yeah. So it's in the same plane with each other, which is what I want. So now I'm just gonna put some tacks on this right here. Start figuring out where these are going to live. These are the coil brackets. the coil spring brackets, and they are going to go right about here, and I'm going to put them at the same degree that the truss is. So basically what I'm going to do, because I know this truss is 100% correct, I'm going to put my angle finder. I'm going to put my angle finder on this, zero that out, and then I'm going to transfer it onto here. I'm just going to find a flat surface there. And now I'm going to zero this out. So you have to get your spacing correct, because if not, when your coil spring comes down, it's going to be slinky mod is what I've seen it called on the internet. So I've got my measurements right here, and typically it's about 7/8 of an inch off of the C right here, and that's about 7/8 right there. So I've got that zeroed out. I have this exactly where I want it. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just put a couple of tacks on here just to hold it on, so that way if I bump into it, it won't fall off. But verifying that it's at zero, and let's do some tacking. Do a little wiggle test. I'm going to put a tack right here. I know that's not going anywhere. Now I'm going to get this other one on. So now I'm just going to go around and just verify that everything is zeroed out. I've got all of these brackets tacked on. I've got them exactly where I want them. And this is going great so far. What I did was I took the track bar that I'm going to be using, and I put a washer in between there, right there, and then I torqued this down so that way I have a little bit of room. That way if the metal has to warp or anything, I can make sure that it'll still go in. But I put a degree finder on it, and it was straight at 90 degrees, so I know that it is installed correctly. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and weld this in. That way I am sure that it's going to be nice and strong before I tack it on the axle. So I've got this all welded up here, and it is extremely hot, so I'm just gonna let that hang out for a couple minutes. So I'm gonna turn my attention to this upper control arm bracket right here. And basically what it is, it's just two pieces. It's just two of these right here, a sleeve, and then there's a rubber bushing that goes in it. And they have these tabs that go right there, and this way right there. Basically you just, so what you're doing is just putting this right there, and that's pretty much it. And so what I like to do is I like to take measurements off this side just to verify that there aren't any imperfections or anything weird, mistakes, anything like that. So I'm going to take some measurements from this side and put my degree finder on it, everything like that, and do the same thing right here, and then tack it up. And then we'll be ready to, and hopefully by the time we get done with that, the track bar mount will be cooled off enough where I can touch it. All right, so I went ahead and fully welded this whole bracket on right here, the upper control arm mount. And now this has pretty much cooled off all the way. But yeah, so I went ahead and fully welded it here. You can see I did a rosette weld there, and just tried to get in as far as I could right there just to strengthen this up, and this is absolutely perfect. Before I ground off all of this, I went ahead and took measurements of where the track bar was, and it's gonna live right about here, I'm gonna put this at the same degree as this, just so that everything is on the same plane, and then everything will play nicely. And honestly, I'm not gonna have to cut off anything, because where this little tab, where that tab lands is right here on the corner, And so it's actually resting on this, and it meets everywhere perfectly. So nothing is in the way of each other, which is really good. The only thing that I have to do is I have to go ahead and I have to weld this up completely before I can put this on, because once I tack this on, then I can't get to these spots down here to weld. And there's going to be a lot of force applied to this truss because of this upper link right here. So even though we have two upper links, let's just say this arm right here fails, then all of the stress and the workload is going to be put onto this joint right here. So we definitely want everything right here super strong and super rigid. So you can see I've already got a pass right here. So I'm just kind of letting it cool off, because you do not want to heat up these axles but so much.
Got it where it counts, kid. I've made a lot of special modifications myself.